Hey everybody, it's Nick. I launched the channel yesterday. I had a bunch of videos already backlogged and ready to go so that you guys would know I was serious about doing this and getting started, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. Obviously there wasn't a huge groundswell, but that's okay. We're going to start small. I'm very excited to keep doing this and excited to keep engaging you guys. It's been a lot of fun, and I hope you guys are enjoying watching the videos. Based on some of the feedback from you guys, I am starting to upgrade the setup just a little bit. I'm going to get a tripod to sort of raise the camera a little bit closer to eye level, and hopefully it'll start looking a little better. I'm going to try to decorate a little bit back here and make it look a little better, but let's get ready. Let's jump right into it. When last we left our heroes, they had done a favor for the Draken tribe in order to get new maps and charts, and when they did so, they left the island with a little bit more than just updated maps and charts. They had in tow a young dragonborn girl named History the 17th, whose mother had implored them to take her away from the island and give her a better life, give her a new opportunity somewhere to live her own life. And they had acquiesced. They also managed to pick up what they strongly suspect to be a blue dragon egg. And this egg was the topic of conversation at the beginning of the session. They knew they were going to the poor, rundown, sort of seedy place known as Volta, which I forgot to actually put on the map. I had sort of thought of Volta after I'd finished the hexographer map. It's in that little cove in the northern part of the map. Maybe you'll figure out into it where it is, but it's not entirely relevant where exactly it is on the map. But it's up there, it's on there, I promise. It's just not labeled. So they're going to Volta, and Volta, they know, is sort of a rundown, seedy place with smugglers, the occasional pirate, some lowlives, some people on the run, outlaws. I sort of described it as Tortuga from Pirates of the Caribbean. So they're figuring, what can we do with this egg? Do we sell it for profit? Do we keep it and have it be a possible pet if the pet doesn't attack us immediately? So there was a lot of conversation about what do we do with this thing, and it could possibly be worth a lot of gold, but we don't know how much gold, and we don't know what a good asking price would be, and how do we trust if we're going to get ripped off or not? None of us has ever sold a dragon egg before, which is a valid point, I thought. What they sort of ended up coming to the conclusion of was that gold could be used here in the city of Volta, but they may or may not be able to use normal gold in other places, and so they figured the egg was currency that they could use in other locations that wouldn't accept gold. And I thought this was a very interesting idea. Their final realization was, at the end of the day, if they didn't have any other use for the egg and they couldn't make it hatch or they couldn't trade it anywhere else, they could always come back here and sell it later. So no need to sell it right away. So as they sail up to the city of Volta, they realize something very quickly. The captain, in his description of Volta, because he had been there 20 years before, was wrong. Volta was not rundown, it was not seedy, it was not a low-life location. It had massive harbor with large sprawling ports and docks and large vessels and seemed to be a hub of activity in the harbor. It had large, enormous walls of white stone or marble surrounding the city. There were buildings of stone and elegance. There was large, tall towers. It seemed to be a really nice place. I think I remember describing it as Minas Tirith, but less like a wedding cake. As they docked, they found out that a little over 15 years ago, a party of wealthy and experienced heroic adventurers had settled in the city of Volta and poured in their enormous resources into the city, making it, well, not crappy. I wanted to sort of do this for a couple of reasons. I wanted to show the players that they could impact the world in a really big way, that if they got to be successful, they could have a huge impact on the rest of the campaign and how it would play out. I also wanted to make a little bit of an in-joke about D&D economics and when players and adventurers come into a town and dump in thousands of gold and it sort of does crazy things to the economy, sort of making a little bit of joke about that, but also imparting the fact that they could have a huge impact on the world. So the crew dock the ship, and the captain lets them know this will be a 6-day stop in the city of Volta. They'll have whatever they want to do is theirs. They have anything they find or keep or earn is theirs. They own it. Don't need to give it back to the ship, with the exception of information. The captain says, any information you gather about our mission, about the region, about any potential threats or issues, you need to turn back in to an officer. Also, he told them, keep a low profile. Don't commit any crimes. Don't do anything that would draw unnecessary attention to us. We'll see how well they stick to that. And he said, don't reveal the true nature of our mission. If anyone asks, we're just here to explore potential trade opportunities, but don't say anything about settling or making a colony or anything along those lines. You see, the central tension of this setting, about this story, about this campaign, is the civilization versus wilderness. The ship and their mission currently, maybe not forever, but currently, represents civilization. They want to come here and explore and settle and have a colony and have rules and laws and order and an organization here. But not everyone in the region may be okay with that. Maybe everyone else in the region wants to stay as wilderness, want to keep things the way that they are, and keep this as just a place where there's no rules, there's no civilization. So there is some tension already set up in that, and I wanted to seed that as early as I could. So as everyone is about to disembark, Callister has a conversation with History the 17th and lets her know that he's not a great guy, he's not wonderful, he's not a great role model, and that she shouldn't want to be around him, and that she's not allowed to come ashore with him because he may be up to no good, and she's not allowed to see that, but she should stay here and he will bring her treats and meals and things like that until they leave later. And sure enough, the first thing he does when they set foot on shore is go gambling. And it was actually a lot of fun. I got to bust out a gambling dice game that I had found on Reddit a long time ago. I will link that for you guys if you want to steal it. Sort of just an interesting, fun, not much role-playing, just a fun little game. And he got to grab some gold and explore a little bit and interact a little bit. And it was just a fun time, very interesting. He seems to be very focused on enlightened self-interest, aka greed. The others had fairly tame outings. They just explored a little bit, asked around, tried to meet some NPCs, see what they could gather about information of the area, and this actually allowed me to seed some potential adventures and quest hooks in there for them. I'm not going to give away exactly what I said or what I did because I don't want to say what the quests and adventures are, but I'll give an example here. Like if they were in a tavern and interacting with somebody, that person could say, man, we have really been losing contact with ships that seem to go around that one island around the southern passage. Northern passage seems fine, but the southern passage, ships don't seem to make it to where they're going on time, if at all. And that's sort of a potential hint that maybe there's something going on the southern side of that island. Maybe there's some kind of sea monster or underwater nation of creatures, or they're getting ambushed by something somehow, or there are bounty hunters, pirates, privateers. It could be a lot of things, but basically I just want to say, hey, there is something going on over there. There is something to be had. There is adventure to be found. There is a problem that might need to be fixed. There is something unusual. I really just cite anything that is unusual or out of the ordinary, and players go, huh, not usual. Maybe we can go kill something and find their stuff. So as we keep going, Clement is intent on finding a way to fly. He goes to magic shops and potion makers and asks around about how you can have any winged boots, boots of flying, potions of flying, anything like that they have. And as it turns out, they absolutely do. He just has no money because he's a third level character and hasn't done anything that exceptional and has, I think, less than 100 gold to his name at this point. Now, the party had been given a robe of useful items by History the 16th in gratitude for taking her daughter away. And Orar was the one who had taken it because nobody else seemed to be intent on taking it out of her hands, and he said, sure, I'll grab it. So he went around to the shops after Clement and used the money that he had from the robe of useful items to purchase some boots of flying. Now, I thought this was going to be a funny little jab, and he was going to say, haha, I have boots of flying, throw it in Clement's face just a little bit, just a fun little prank out of spite. Also a very useful item, but I thought it would just be a bit of a jab at him, and it would be sort of a back and forth. That'd be very interesting. That was not the case. That's not what happened. Instead, later that evening, when they got back to the boat, Clement was sitting on his bunk, and Orar tosses these boots of flying to him and says, here you go, kid. Don't get yourself killed. He just gives him a magic item. I was blown away, and so was Clement's player. He was through the roof, he was over the moon, he was up and above some other very high thing. He was very excited. It was awesome. And I thought that was super cool. The party really hadn't had a chance to gel at this point yet. They hadn't had any traumatic, excessive experience that had forced them to come together and rely on one another as a team. And so it was very interesting to see that organically happen. This one player says, hey, I'm just going to do a nice thing for somebody else. I was so thrilled. I love it when the team comes together and they're one big happy family, and that's very exciting to me, and they can go face the big dangerous adventures themselves. Obviously, I love some inter-party conflict and sniping back and forth at a healthy level level, if we can keep it at a character level and not a player level, but that was very fun. I enjoyed that. So here's an interesting thing to note. I had very little planned for the whole session. I told them from the get-go, guys, this might be like a 30 or 40-minute session. Could go for 3 or 4 hours. I don't know. Usually we play for 3.5 to 5 hours, kind of varies. 4.5 is pretty typical. And so I said, hey, this could be a really short session. I let them know in the week beforehand, hey guys, we're going to be in Volta, we're going to be in a city. If there are any things that you want to do, if there's any stuff you want to look out for, any things you want to get, any adventures you want to have, try to think of those ahead of time, because I'm not going to necessarily force you guys into stuff. It's sort of self-directed once you're out and about in a city. So this, I guess, is a small lesson in and of itself. You don't always have to have an extensive plan for this is exactly what's going to happen. Sometimes it's nice to say, okay, first they're going to go into the mines, they're going to find the goblins, they're going to free the dwarves, they're going to do this, that, and the other, and it'll be a very straightforward thing. And there are choices, obviously. There are things that they can do and ways they could do them, but you have a really solid understanding of what events will play out, even if the sequence of events is a mystery to you. However, this time, I didn't really know much. I just planned, this is the city. This is what's going on. These are some NPCs, some magic shops, some things happening in the city, a couple of little things that they could do and interact with, some quest hooks that I want to seed, and the big stadium fighting arenas where gladiatorial matches happen with monsters from the region. So that's really all I had planned, and this is a lesson in rolling with it. If your players have stuff they want to do, being able to just on the fly go with it and say, okay, cool, let's improv this all together. A lot of times there's that needle of like who is the primary storyteller, who's guiding and leading the action, and a lot of times it rests with the DM, that they sort of set the tone and the pace and everything, but sometimes that needle can swing back a little bit towards the players and let them guide and direct themselves. I think that's totally okay. In moderation or whatever your group's dynamic and balance is, it can be totally fine to let them self-direct and self-guide and say, where do you guys want to go? I'm just going to adapt to that on the fly and figure out what I can figure out. Luckily, it was not a 40-minute session. Lots of very interesting things happened. Very quickly, Tico the monk and Callister, the new bard, were attracted to the fighting arena, fighting pits. There is actually 2 of them. One is called the arena and one is called the pit. And Tico was very interested in exploring them and seeing what kinds of things they might fight later on, because these are the kind of things that are in the region. And so he paid his silver piece to get into the arena and watch some cool stuff. So maybe some of the monsters that he saw in there will show up later in the game. I very much hope so. Some very interesting fights went down. Now, I sort of thought that the party would be all together for most of the session and that they would talk about or at least consider the possibility of fighting in a pit. They were nowhere near qualified or proven or capable enough to fight in the arena, but the pit was sort of the training grounds, and they could maybe get a fight or two in there, earn some money, earn some reputation. But they didn't even ask about that. They didn't even talk about it. They didn't even really consider it, and I was sort of surprised by that. I'm always thrown off a little bit when I present the players with an option and they don't even discuss it. I think that usually means I did something wrong. I didn't present it in an interesting way. I didn't explain it in a way that was engaging or exciting to them as an option. They don't need to take it. They don't have to follow it. But to not even consider it makes me think that maybe I was in the wrong there a little bit. However, what did end up happening was exceptional. Callister wasn't so much interested in participating or watching the arena or pit fights like Tico was. He decided to let that greed surface once again, and instead he had a very interesting scenario of shenanigans that unfolded. I'm so excited to tell you the story. It was phenomenal. So Callister sees that the situation for entering into the arena is you pay a silver piece to some kind of clerk or an official who has just a sack of silver, and there's a lot of them. I described it a lot like a football game. You're going in, there's people sort of checking your tickets, and there's security guards, and I said each clerk was accompanied by a full-plate, serious-looking knight. So Callister walks up to one of these clerks and casts suggestion and says, hey man, your shift is up. I'm your replacement. And the guy failed his saving throw and said, okay, cool, man, here's the silver. You might argue that it wasn't a reasonable suggestion, but I thought that, let's roll with it. Let's see where this player wants to go. I don't want to just shut him down and say, nope, that wasn't reasonable. You can't do the thing you were trying to do. And I knew that he wasn't just going to get a free bag of silver. There was still a knight standing right over his shoulder. I just wanted to sort of see where the situation would play out. So you don't always have to play it exactly by the wording of the rules, because the wording of that spell says, hey, the DM gets to decide what exactly is a reasonable course of action. And I figured based on the situation, based on what was going on, it was going to be a reasonable course of action, and saying no, I could sense, would be a lot less fun than saying yes. And at the end of the day, it's a game. It's about having fun, right? So I figured saying yes is awesome, so let's say yes. So now Callister is sitting there with a small sack of silver, taking people's admittance and letting them into the arena. And then as the crowd starts to die down, the knight reminds him, hey, it's time to go and turn that in at the offices downstairs below the arena. And Callister says, oh, yeah, of course, yeah, let's go. And begins to walk this way. Callister, he has a bag of what he gauges to be about 150, maybe 200 silver pieces, which is about 15 or 20 gold. So not a fortune by any stretch of the imagination, but about as much gold as the character has on his person right now anyways. So Callister agrees. He follows the knight downstairs and begins to proceed into the tunnels and underworkings of the arena itself. At this point, his options narrow dramatically. He is underground. He's by himself with a knight that clearly will not let him or the sack of silver out of his sight. They're walking together towards some offices, and Callister is asking a lot of questions about his situation to figure out exactly what he can do, and he figures very quickly it would not be reasonable to suggest upon the guard to, like, leave him alone and all of that. So he's trying to figure out what his options are, and the options are going more and more narrow as things progress. So at this point, in a bit of a panic, trying to figure out what he can do to get himself out of this situation, Callister asks for the bathroom to see if he can buy himself a little bit of time or see some sort of alternative. And the knight agrees, actually. He says, yep, sure, down this way, keep going. Again, I wanted to roll with this situation. I wanted to see how far this character would take it. This was a role-playing situation that hadn't come up before. I wanted to take it and run with it rather than just saying, no, that doesn't seem reasonable. The guard wouldn't let you just take a bathroom break, turn the money in first, and then take a bathroom break. I wanted to go with it. I wanted to see where he would take it. So I said, yes, down this way is a bathroom. Let's go in there. But the knight follows him. So there is a bathroom. It's pretty ramshackle. I'm thinking, kind of Roman style. This is a Colosseum, right? So Roman style bathroom. There's a big plank and it just has holes in it for where people can use the bathroom. And the knight steps into the room with him. Maybe Callister hadn't factored this in. I don't know what his plan would have been if the knight had left. There's only the one door, right? And so Callister is sitting there. There is a fearsome, large, dangerous-looking knight between him and the only exit. So he does something that he thinks might work, and I thought it might work. He cast Dissonant Whispers on the knight. And the spell is going to do a bunch of damage, and the spell is going to cause the knight to use his reaction to flee away from the source of the spell. It would have been a great spell. It would have been a great use of it if the knight hadn't rolled a natural 20 on his saving throw. So at this point, the knight whirls around, draws his sword, steps forward, and I made a point of saying he is stepping in range of you, and says, you're under arrest. So Callister is sitting there. He has a knight between him and the only way out, and a sack of silver at his feet. He's being placed under arrest. I figured he would still be able to get out of this without losing a character. He maybe would be in the stocks for a day or two, the rest of the time in the city. This was sort of his worst-case scenario exit strategy. But he had another option. He realized there was a second way out. And it was not the most advisable way, but he took it. So, on his turn, he flips up the plank, grabs the sack of silver, and jumps into the sewage and the sewers below. On his way out, the knight makes an attack of opportunity, cuts open his back, and deals 11 points of damage, which was a serious blow, but not enough to kill Callister. However, that wound is going to play a larger role than just the 11 hit points it took away from Callister. Stay tuned for next week. I took enormous pleasure in describing in vivid detail the exact awful muck, filth, stench that Callister slid and fell down into. He's in awful refuse and sewage up to his knees, his mid-thighs, and he's wading through it. He had to make constitution saving throws just to avoid vomiting and retching all the time. He eventually made his way out, navigated out of the sewers. Took about 45 minutes in-game of doing that, and man, it was tough. He eventually finds his way out. He's about 500 yards south and outside of the city, so he washes off a little bit in the ocean. He goes back into the city, he goes to a bathhouse, buys new clothes because those are destroyed. At the end of the day, he totals up all of his earnings, and from this tremendous escapade, he has netted himself a total of 16 gold pieces. So we'll see if that was worth the effort or not, but it wasn't exactly a fortune. However, as he exits the bathhouse with his new clothes, Callister learns that he has gained more than just some fancy new threads and a bit of gold. He's also gained a reputation because there was a town crier explaining that there was a robbery from the arena and that a guard who was involved in the situation is discussing it with authorities and giving them a description of the suspect, and that they will have that description posted as wanted posters on message boards soon enough. Now Callister is a bit upset by this because he has gained a bit of a reputation for infamy here in the city already. And the captain had just warned them, don't commit any crimes, so he's making it harder on himself to return back to the ship easily and for the ship to leave peacefully. But his response to the situation is to go around and spend the rest of the evening, spend a gold or two, and start rumors in various bars that actually the guard, the knight, who was involved in the situation was in on it the whole time, and he was the real criminal mastermind. So we'll see if that rumor has any traction to it. Stay tuned. So with that major heist out of the way and the long series of laughs that accompanied it, there are only a couple of major things left to happen in the session, only a few things that I had planned. One of the things was that the second to last morning that the crew members, the players, are getting off the boat, they spot a very elderly old woman who has dropped a small box in the middle of the crowd, and nobody else seems to notice. So Clement rushes forward, grabs the box, and tries to return it to the old lady. And the old lady's response is,
"No, thank you. No, you keep it. And actually, because I know you're trustworthy, I can give you this note."
I had a lot of fun role-playing that old lady. So he takes the note and reads it, and it says, "Thank you, and I know you're kind-hearted and trustworthy, and because of that, I want you to meet me at the Silky Tap Tavern tonight. I have something to ask of you." So this is very interesting. The party is sort of ready for that to happen. They spend most of the rest of the day just kind of meandering around the city, doing a couple of various things, interacting with some NPCs, gaining some more information. But for the most part, we sort of just jump straight to that night at the tavern. And the old lady explains that she is a census taker. She is responsible for gathering population information and data on various people groups and tribes within the region of the Southern Isles, but she's too old and frail to perform her duties anymore, to sail around and meet them personally. So she asks the players to go and gather information for her, and she'll reward them. The players sort of tentatively agree to this situation. They don't know exactly what her motivations are, but it seems harmless enough at the moment. And so they give her some information that they already had on the Draken tribe, and she rewards them for it. They're grateful, they're excited, they have a cool patron who's giving them cool stuff, and all they have to do is go interact with people. This is sort of my way of getting the players to meet and interact with lots of different tribes and factions and people groups within the region. I wanted them to explore and meet lots of people, and I figured, hey, the way that you do that is you motivate players by giving them stuff, giving them items, giving them magic, giving them money. So the players were hyped about it. It was a very interesting encounter. I had a lot of fun role-playing that old lady and
Her little old lady voice.
I had a lot of fun. It was great. And so then the very last thing to happen is that night they're coming back. They have one more day left in the city, but this is the last night. They come back, and Callister has been bringing treats and food and all kinds of stuff for History the 16th the whole time as she's been on the ship. And they get back, and she's not there. In fact, there's a note left for Callister, and it says, "Hey, you've done a great job of taking care of me, and I appreciate everything you've done, but you said so yourself. You're not a good person. You're not somebody I should be around. You're not a good role model. So thank you for bringing me here. Thank you for taking care of me, but I'm going to go take care of myself now. I'm going to go be off on my own. You don't have to look for me. Don't worry about it. Thanks for everything, but I'll see you next time." And Callister was a little nervous by this. That's exactly where we left the session. I read that note to them and said, and that's where we're going to end tonight's session. I like ending on a cliffhanger because it gives them all week to stew on what are we going to do next time? What are we going to think of? What are we going to plan for? So they have one more day left in the city of Volta. And I'm sort of expecting Callister to go and look for History the 17th, go and look for his charge, his ward, and we'll see what he finds or doesn't find, and if he does interact with her, what that will bring. I'm not certain. So that's where we left things. The players had gotten a few magic items, met some NPCs, grabbed some hooks, learned some information, explored a little bit, gotten themselves a warrant for one of their arrests. It was a pretty typical city session, if you ask me. So that's where we'll pick up next week. I'm expecting Callister to start off by exploring for History the 17th, but he may have bigger fish to fry as he has an open wound that he exposed to copious amounts of raw sewage. So we'll see what happens with that. So I hope you guys enjoyed the story, had some lessons in there that maybe you could learn about NPCs and some fun role-playing, rolling with it when the player goes with it. Don't just play strictly to raw. Feel free to go with your players a little bit and feel out a fun situation and just improvise a bit and not necessarily have everything planned, but go with your players, explore with them, have a fun story with them. But I'm having a blast making these videos, and I hope you guys are having a blast watching them. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.